I'm Rick Albert, and welcome to The Key to the City of Angels, the podcast where we unlock the secrets of Los Angeles real estate. With over 300 real estate deals under my belt, I've seen it all, from house hacking strategies that build wealth to helping clients close multi-million-dollar deals in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Every week, I'll bring you expert insights, market trends, and inspiring success stories to help you navigate the LA real estate scene. Whether you're a first-time buyer, an investor, or just curious about what it takes to thrive in the City of Angels, this podcast is your guide to making smarter decisions and achieving your goals. So grab your keys. It's time to unlock your path to prosperity in Los Angeles real estate. Hello, everyone. Rick Albert here, the host of The Key to the City of Angels. I'm excited today to have Tyler Tapley. You're actually based out of Memphis, right? As a realtor there. For those that have been on my YouTube channel, for a while, I was having what I called the Knowledge Broker Show, where we talk about what's going on in the news. And I've decided to kind of incorporate that into the podcast because a lot of our listeners, they do look at things at a nationwide level because, as Tyler might bring up, is like you have investor clients from all over. I have investor clients that invest all over. So some of this information might be relevant to them.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier, and obviously you're based out of LA. I was just in LA last week, meeting with tons of out-of-state investors that we work with. The two biggest markets for my investors are actually Orange County, and then honestly, Colorado is a big one too. And I think that kind of makes sense. I think in Denver, you get a younger generation and they kind of find me via Google or something like that. They find Memphis, they look to invest in Memphis, and our paths come across that way. So yeah, we get tons of investors from California, Colorado. We actually deal with several from Israel, Argentina, Japan. They all invest in Memphis, which is very surprising, but we're very fortunate. We enjoy working with them.
Yeah, very cool. That is kind of interesting. So we'll go ahead. So the National Association of Realtors came out with an article recently. We're currently filming this on March 5th. This came out towards the end of February, where they say things are looking up, and they kind of analyze the market, what's going on. They anticipate 7 to 12% increase in existing home sales. They anticipate a 2% actually increase in the median home price sale. And then we'll go into some of the other stuff they talk about. But I wanted to get kind of your reaction to that. You know, do you really think that there's going to be more home sales going forward?
So at least in the Memphis market, we're really not seeing that. 2024 it mirrored 2023 for us. And I've been an agent for a long time. I was doing it during the recession. So I remember back in the day when it was all these foreclosures and you didn't even rehab the house. Like it didn't make sense to fix them up. So the banks would just sell $300,000, $400,000 houses and they'd be in terrible shape. You know, they'd be smelly, rotted wood, just things like that, because it just didn't make sense to rehab them. They wouldn't appraise, they weren't buyers. So getting back to right now, 2024 for us was fine. I actually had a really good year. 2024 worked out fine, but we definitely noticed it slowing down in December, and some of that's seasonal. Let's face it, every year during the holidays, it's going to slow down. But December and January were terrible. February has picked up, and obviously now we're talking in March, and so we're hitting the spring market. So I'm very hopeful. But I am concerned because, and I think you would agree, late 2024 to early 2025 so far has not been good. And I'm hoping interest rates will go down. Obviously, with the spring market, we don't have the great weather that you have in California, but I think that there's some increases we'll see. I just don't know to the degree that they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the 7 to 12% increase in home sales sounds like a lot in the big scheme of things, because you still have this market of people who are below, 5% interest rate. We used to say anything below 3%. Now we're saying below 5%. It's like amazing. So a lot of people aren't going to move. what might be interesting to see is people who did buy in 2023, where they did have the higher interest rates. So let's say they bought a condo. Fast forward now, it's like, well, they can capitalize on the tax-free gains and they might be moving up to that single family home. And then the interest rate doesn't matter to them because
Right.
they're already used to it. So we might see some of that is what I'm thinking. But even then, it's kind of a wash. You put one home on the market, now they're also part of the demand problem.
I agree. And I will be curious. We're obviously, if interest rates go down, even just a tick, that would really help. Obviously,
Sure.
there's been like a waiting game of people, well, should I go ahead and buy now or could rates go down? The one thing, though, that's kind of counterintuitive to what NAR is saying is it sounds like they're saying that the prices will go up. And
Mm-hmm.
the values, at least in the Memphis market, things have been very stable. Our values are pretty much the same as they were in 2023 and 2024, which of course means if you list your house right now and you had bought it recently, there's not going to be tons of equity. What we're
Sure.
really seeing, at least in the Memphis market, is a lot of seller concessions. And I don't know how much of that you see where you're at, but in our
Mm-hmm.
market, it's very standard for a seller to make repairs. It's very standard to ask for closing cost assistance. In fact, a lot of the buyers we have, if the house is under 200,000, many times in our market, the seller will have to pay not just the majority of the buyer's closing costs, pretty much all of them. I mean, so on a $200,000 house, you're paying $6,000 to $9,000 easily. The seller is
Mm.
on behalf of the buyer. And you really have to do that. We don't see the bidding wars and things like that consistently. Like in most markets, we have some areas that have really good schools and are very popular. The attention level definitely went down, but now it is picking up. Like those houses are going to sell. It may take 30 days, it may take 45 or 60 days, but there's going to be enough interest. The problem we have is in some of the inner parts of the city, we're just not, even though those houses are less money, we're just not seeing the demand.
Yeah. It'll be interesting here in LA. It might fluctuate a little bit just because, like, in general, home prices continue to climb. LA is known for appreciation. There's just no more
Sure,
land to build.
sure,
Now, anytime I see like the average sales price for a given month, I now have to remember it's like, well, unfortunately, we did have some fires. That
sure.
affects the overall average, right? Because like the Palisades, the average price point was 3.5 million. Now land's going to be about a million, 1.2.
Sure.
So that can fluctuate. It's not going to be a huge difference. But what's interesting is for us, we noticed in December to January, there actually was a slight decline, slight hiccup. Then it was really slow in January. A lot of that has to do with the fires. So lenders and especially insurance companies were like, yeah, we're not going to issue any insurance until we close. Like I just had a closing last month in February that was supposed to close in January.
And if they put like basically like a stop order on land, like you can't really sell that right now if you wanted to, is that correct? Is there like
There's no stop order. What was happening was a lot of investors were trying to hunt for these listings. And then the governor's like, no, dude, not cool. Let these people like figure out what they need to do. If they want to go to the open market, let them go to the open market. But there was a lot of like aggressive, like lowball offers, stuff like that. Oh, your house burnt down. It's like you're trying to take advantage of a bad situation. And so that's what we were seeing. And to your point, that stuff isn't really allowed.
wow.
Yeah. So, the report that National Association of Realtors came out with was saying a 2% increase. That kind of makes sense in markets like Texas. I'm seeing a lot of that slow down. Pretty much markets where there's tons of new construction.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's funny. My wife's also an agent. I have a team. We are closing on Friday, so less than a week from now, a new construction house with D.R. Horton, who's a big builder.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of them.
Yeah.
And one of my team members, one of my buyer's agents, she goes out of her way to kind of focus on new construction, not because it's necessarily the shiny new toy, but because D.R. Horton and some of these other builders can offer lower interest rates. And that's what we're really seeing. So the client that we're closing once again later this week, it's an elderly couple that's retiring. And they really said, they're like, look, we don't have to move. We kind of want to move just for the convenience. If we can get a brand new house, that'd be great. It's less maintenance. Oh, and by the way, the interest rate is lower than anything we're going to see right now. So, we talked earlier about prices, and we're not seeing some massive decline, but what we are seeing, a $200,000 house, if you're giving a five, six, $9,000 concession in terms of seller paid closing costs, plus making repairs, plus a home warranty, that really adds up. So
Sure.
I'm not real sure as far as NAR. I could see when they talk about the pricing going up, I could see like more focus on new construction. So therefore,
Mhm.
there's more new construction sales, therefore the price would be higher. But I just really think concessions are much higher than what we've seen in the past.
Which might be hard to report on, right? Because
Exactly.
I've had a client where we actually offered higher so that way they could get the concession to cover all the closing costs. But their report's only going to show the higher number. They're not factoring in all those concessions.
Well, the other thing, and this is you're a great person to talk to about, is the elephant in the room is also talking about buyer compensation or buyer agent
Hmm.
compensation.
Right.
And it's not something we can measure anymore since it's not posted on the MLS. I would think in your market, because the price range of the houses are so much more, it's probably not, it's probably not typically 3% to each agent or anything like that.
Right.
Are you seeing sellers just absolutely refuse to offer compensation? Are they trying to lower it, or what are they doing?
It's a good question. So typically we see between 2 to 2.5. I've been putting in my offers 3. I might as well shoot my shot, right? Let them counter.
They don't know or just wants it sold and says, so be it.
Yeah,
Or they
exactly.
plan on doing that anyway. They may have just anticipated that. Sure.
Exactly. And it's always about what they net. Have I seen sellers push it? I did recently. And I think it's because the seller had to net a certain amount, right? So like we were negotiating the price. So then they started focusing on my commission. So in my case, my buyer was actually generous. They brought it up. They actually paid the difference. It was a
So
cash deal.
I'm smiling because I said earlier, I'm chuckling because I said earlier that one of our, we have so many clients from California who have bought
Hmm.
into this and are investors. And just last week, I talked to a guy, and it was a $80,000 house. And the very first question is, "What's the commission?" And literally, that's the first thing. It's not, why should I work with you? It's what's the commission? And I say, well, it's standard here to still do 3% to each agent. You don't have to do that, but that is the standard amount. And I said, what were you thinking? Just curious. And he said, well, where I live, it's usually 2%. And I was afraid as soon as I, answered his question, he would just hang up the phone and say, thanks a lot, sayonara. But he kept talking to me, and I said, okay, well, 2%. He had a California number. He had like a Sacramento
Hmm.
number. And I said, just curious, what was the price range of the house that you recently sold? And he said, 800,000. And I chuckled and I was like, well, yes, I have no problem doing this at 2% if it's 800. And so we obviously kept talking. I was like, sir, your house is 90% more than what we're talking about. This is an $80,000 house. And I said, I really would like to see this be listed at 6% total. I'm not going to say it can't be done. And I said, but we're really talking about a small amount of money, all things considered. And I said, just
Right.
give me the opportunity. If we get a low offer, we get something that's not acceptable to you, hey, I'll work with you. It's not set in stone. It's, we can review it. And we truly got an offer on it within 4 days. And he's happy. It's cash, and the buyer has to do an inspection. But the point being, we something that I thought would be really difficult or not fun to talk about was pretty simple. And
Yeah, it hasn't been an issue on our end when I'm talking to sellers and maybe because we're at a higher price point, they
sure.
look at it and say, well, I can't expect a buyer to come up with a down payment, closing costs, and compensation.
Well, in the market, at least in Memphis and nationwide, kind of getting back to the NAR thing, it's not a super seller's market right now. Clearly, it probably leans either to normal or to the buyer side. Now, when we get to a seller market again, like we had in COVID, when buyers were literally waiving appraisals, I mean, like banks
Mhm.
would the appraisal, buyers would waive inspections. Could I see commissions getting squeezed? Absolutely, I could
Yeah.
see that. And frankly, they probably should. If you were being neutral about it and you're not an agent, if it's really that simple and easy, then sure. If it doesn't require the long hours and things like that, but I understand that piece by NAR. I've actually read several statements from large real estate investment trusts,
Hmm.
people that are companies that own tons of rental houses. I read one last night. For the first time, they had seen a 2.2% rent reduction. So on their properties that these are companies like American Homes for Rent, Blackstone, people like that. This one specific one told their investors that rents had gone down. They had seen a 2.2% decrease in rents. So I don't know. To answer that analysis that NAR's putting out, I could see, as you said, maybe a focus on new construction, which could drive prices up. I really think interest rates have to go down. Once again, as I was mentioning, Zillow and a couple of groups like that, they keep changing their forecast and it's getting more negative, shall we say. They're not saying, they're not coming up with these increase in terms of numbers.
Well, and to be fair, when the article came out, it was before a lot of the tariffs kicked in.
True.
Right. So like that could play a huge role because I mean, you still, wherever there's none of land to build, that's usually where we see the more appreciation. So the 2%, now thinking out loud, you're right. Maybe the 2% starts to make more sense when you have areas like Los Angeles that might see a 5% increase versus Memphis, which might be a little bit slower, or Texas, Florida. Now it'll be interesting. I have a client sold her house here. She ended up buying in Florida. And then because of everything that happened politically, she now doesn't want to live in Florida.
Hmm. So Florida, I think you've probably seen this. They have so much inventory. They have not had this
I did
inventory
read that.
in a long time. I mean, it's gone. I mean, it's unbelievable. Speaking of inventory, I've actually got this is the Memphis stats.
Yeah.
So in January, Memphis had 3,500, they had 3,500 houses for sale in January, which is kind of interesting because typically people take off the houses in January,
Yeah.
January, December, with holidays, it's cold weather, just people aren't moving. I'm glancing at this while I'm talking to you. That is more inventory than we had in January 2024. In January 2024, we had 3,300. This is interesting. In January 2023, we had 2,600. So January 2023, we had 2,600. January 2024, we had 3,300. January 2025, we have 3,511. So I think it's safe to say that our inventory level is quite healthy, and there's plenty of things. And once again, to piggyback off what we're saying, when that happens and there's more competition, you're clearly going to see concessions by sellers.
Right.
You're going to see price reductions. You're going to see prices, frankly, go down a little bit. So that's probably why I love, talking with you, because not everything's the same. On the West Coast,
Right.
it is a bit different than in Memphis. We're definitely selling real estate. Like I said, I'm going to have a really good March, but a lot of our clients are investors that can pay cash. They'll buy. I think, and this is true even where you're at, I think there's a lot of money on the sidelines.
Tons.
I think people have waited. I remember we could have said, we could have gone back to the summer of 2024 and it's like, yeah, it's good, but let's see what happens with the election. Well, then the election comes. It's like, all right, well, okay. But, it really is November and December. That's not a great time. Why don't we get to the spring? And then by then it'll pick up. And of course, now we're dealing with tariffs. But I really think we've had so many people that have been on the sidelines that have just accumulated money that they can move if needed. So, and I think they will.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a client. I sold his house a few years ago where he did the whole lived in it for a long time. Then he rented it out for a few years. So he still was in that capital gains window. So he's like, and yeah, he had to pay some taxes. But anyways, he's like, that was 2 years ago. He still has the same 500,000 in the bank. He's just like, I can't find anything. Because that was part of it too. It's like there, even though inventory has been rising, even in LA, I always like to check the month supply.
Sure.
So right now we're at 3.5-ish months, which has been slowly increasing. So it's still technically a seller's market. Some sellers are pricing their properties artificially low. I'm in the middle of that right now. I'm representing a cash buyer. We're one of 16 offers.
Wow.
I know. And I'm a little annoyed because it's it was already I'm all for pricing properties slightly lower, get interest, but it's I knew going into this was way too low. And it's like, well, now you just wasted probably out of the 15 offers or 16 offers, you probably wasted 10 of them because they never had a shot.
I'm grimacing because I know that from your side, if you have that buyer and let's say the sales price is $1 million, the buyer's like, all right, well, I'll give them $1 million. I gave them what they asked for. And you're like,
Right?
you did, but so did these other 15 people. And that's so hard because it is, it is an emotional thing. And I remember now that I think about it, obviously I bought a few houses and, made offers and didn't get it. And,
Yeah.
24, 25, and you're buying your first house, getting an FHA mortgage, and you don't get it, you think it's the end of the world, and it's really not. But that does require hand holding and explaining to people and patience and everything else. So
Yeah. The blame game starts, is what I like to say. They start blaming their agent, start blaming their lender, start blaming all these other people. And it's like, it just is what it is.
Well, in your example you just gave, you said it was 16 offers. That means 15 people are going to be unhappy, and that's a lot of people. So
and a lot of that could have been avoided. They still could have gotten what they wanted, right? Because they priced it so low, and I'm like, fine, I'll give it a shot. My clients like the house.
I've been very fortunate, and I've done several interviews. You're one of the first hosts I've had that's really referenced capital gains, 1031s, things like that. Obviously, I'm used to it because that's the world that I'm dealing with. And I've heard rumors that like 80% of commercial transactions in California involve like a 1031 or something like that.
I'm sure.
And who knows, but it's a lot. And we get tons of 1031 clients that are selling something in California or on the West Coast, and and it's not millions, but they'll have 600,000, 800,000, and you can come to Memphis and you can buy a really good house for 125,000. You can for 150 grand. You can probably buy one for 100,000 that'll rent for $1,000. And so anyway, that's a credit to you. It shows obviously in where you're at how important that really is and how people focus on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
They say obviously listings are king, and they are, but I would tell you that, and funny enough, I have 136 listings right now. Like we have a lot of listings. You're talking about inventory. We have 136 listings.
You are the inventory.
There's only 3,511 for sale. I mean, we have 4,000 agents in Memphis. And I have 136 listings. But, I always say to people, because you do want to, obviously, if you have listings, I think it's like list to last. But I will tell you, if you have a 1031 buyer who has already bought and is trying to identify, that's pretty darn good. In some ways, I could say that might be better in the sense that they buy and then hopefully they use you when they go to sell, whenever that is. So
I can beat that. Have you ever done a reverse 1031 exchange?
I've heard of them. I have not. You'll have to remind me of what that is. I've definitely heard of that. I haven't had it.
I've done 2 of them now for clients. So basically, they buy the property first. Then you have 6 months to sell the other property.
Wow.
Right. It's the opposite.
Right. So is it a little less stressful in the sense that they don't, they can kind of take their time and be more kind of identify it and be a little choosy?
Yeah. So it is more expensive, right? The typical 1031 exchange is like $1,200. Right, to do it. This is more along the lines of like $7,000 because it's much more complicated. But again, in LA with the higher price points, like I'll spend $7,000 if it means I don't have to stress over it.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. Actually, that really does. Wow, that's a great. I do. The only thing, at least in the Memphis market, I would be hesitant that somebody would say they're going to do it and then they just don't like what's on the market and therefore they kind of wait. And if that makes sense, I do like. Once again, with the 1031s, just at least when the people reach out to us, they've already had their house under contract.
Right.
It's funny, now that I'm talking to you, we just dealt with a lady in New Jersey. She bought and she reached out to us. Her house in New Jersey, her investment property was about to be listed. It was not under contract, but it was about to be listed. And she reaches out and she was just a normal lady, not some professional investor that's been doing this forever. But she reaches out. I guess she found the Memphis market, sent me a message on Realtor.com. Like, I don't even advertise. She just messaged me on there. And a lot of that stuff is spam. Like, it might be,
Sure.
but this was
I
a
get that
real,
all the time.
exactly. So this was a real lady. And she, obviously, we can't write the offer until she gets her house closed, but she lists it probably 3 weeks after we initially talk. It goes off without a hitch. And we had already identified, so while she's under contract, we've already identified just some options for her. Like, hey, here's what your money gets you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like this? Or you flabbergasted at what you're disappointed in what your money gets you? And she wanted really good areas of Shelby County. So LA, how many counties is LA roughly? Any idea how many counties y'all have?
Well, we have we have actually Los Angeles is in Los Angeles County.
Big
And then,
areas like
yeah,
Pasadena.
I mean, in Southern California and the nearby counties, we have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven.
And you get to like Beverly Hills and all the other.
Yeah, I mean, those are the counties. And then within the county of LA, there's tons of cities. I'd have to take a look. The city of LA alone has 209 neighborhoods.
Okay, so
And
that's kind of where I was going with that. So
yeah.
Memphis is just one county. We're just one
Mhm.
county. We have cities. We really don't have that many cities. We only have probably off the hand probably 7 suburbs or whatever that have their own
Okay.
government. That's all under one county. So, back to that lady, she said, "Look, I want really good schools, and I really want multifamily." So at least in Memphis, we don't have. You're not driving down the street and you just see like a 6 unit or 10 unit or 20 unit.
Right.
We just don't have those. We were able to find her a duplex, and it was actually incredibly rare because you really don't see this. We were able to find her a duplex for around 220 grand, and the rent on that's probably $1,800 total. I'm just giving you some numbers to see, so you can see
Sure.
it. So she sells that property in New Jersey. She buys a duplex from us in a really good area with good schools. And then she bought another property from us inside Memphis that did have pretty good schools. It was around 200,000. So yeah, that's kind of how we handle it when investors reach out to us. But it was great. And by the way, the whole thing, we didn't need 6 months. We didn't even need the 45 days. I mean, literally as soon as she closed on the New Jersey and sold that, we were ready to go.
So
So
I wonder if NAR will track that because to your point, like if they're saying their sales are going to be up 7 to 12%, what percentage of that are going to be 1031 exchanges? Because I know here in LA, a lot of the mom and pop landlords, they're fed up. The rent
yeah.
control laws, all that. And they're like, yeah, once my tenant leaves, I'm selling.
So your audience may not know this. Tennessee is a very landlord friendly state,
Right.
and you have rules that, I mean, I go on Twitter and I see these rules in California, and I'm like, that literally doesn't make sense. Like, I don't believe it. Like, I read these rules and I'm like, I don't see how that can be approved.
Works. Yeah.
We don't have rent control. We don't have anything along those lines. And
Right.
we do get a lot of investors that kind of get sick of the high prices on the West Coast, but they also get sick of some of those rules. And it's not a coincidence that we talk about Texas, we talk about Florida, we talk about Tennessee, particularly Nashville, Knoxville, which is about 6 hours from us. Nashville's in the middle of the state. Knoxville's 2 hours east of there. High growth areas, very landlord friendly, good governments, things like that, pro business. So it's made the news here. In-N-Out Burger has obviously been, I guess,
I mean, it's huge. Now we can all move. Now that was my one decision of my moving out of state was In-N-Out.
There you go. So it'll be back to that article. I sincerely hope that's the case. It would be fantastic. And it's a little conflicting because, like I said, as we talk, it's early March and my March is going to be really good. But most of my clients are not retail owner occupant buyers right now. I'm worried that those types of buyers are sitting on the sidelines because, as we said, the prices just haven't gone down. And if prices do go up, I just worry about that. I don't know that get off the fence and buy. So we'll see.
I mean, it's because I have a lot of people reach out to me because like one of my big, I'll call it claim to fame was I'm a house hacker, right? So you buy, rent by the room, rent out another unit. So I've had a lot of people reach out to me through different sources and say, hey, I want to do what you did. And I'm like, I
Mm,
appreciate that, but I bought my first place in 2015.
sure.
Right? I rode the appreciation wave. I rode the low interest rate wave. Now, you can still house hack. Here's how you would do it. But to replicate what I did, I bought my condo for $225,000. To put in perspective, I put in maybe about over the years, $25,000 worth of work. I sold it from 2015 to 2022. I sold it for $453,000. I
Wow.
basically doubled my money.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But we're
Yeah.
not going to see that anymore. We're not doubling our money in 7 years.
So as soon as you said you're a house hacker, before you even finished your sentence, I'm thinking of your story. I'm thinking, well, yeah, but what did you pay for it? Because
Right.
and so it's kind of deflating when I do get.
Hmm.
Well, I get a lot of investors that will reach out to me, and I actually, now that I think about it, I talked to somebody out of Newport Beach 2 weeks ago. Really smart guy. He was a commercial agent. They said he did multifamily and industrial, and I said, listen, I would love for you to start investing in Memphis, but I don't think you're going to see, if you go on Google and you read all these success stories, the days of buying houses for 30, 40, $50,000 that
Right.
were $700, we're not seeing those anymore. And it's a lot like the house hack. I have right now 4 Airbnbs for sale that are furnished and everything.
Mm.
And the numbers on them are still pretty good, but these sellers aren't, once we get talking about price, they don't want to take some huge loss. You know, maybe they bought them for 200,000. They've got 15,000 worth of equipment in there. They're going to want 240, 250. They're not going to sell that for 200,000. And investor wise, unfortunately, if you and I were underwriting this deal or considering it, because rates are so high, it just takes away some of that profit. And you say, man, I can't make the numbers work. And that was what that guy in Fort Beach said. He was excited, but he didn't realize that the values unfortunately had gone up so much to where it just isn't as easy to do as before.
And to be fair, like if I was like, oh yeah, I read these success stories of people who bought properties 10 years ago. If the prices are the same as they were 10 years ago, I'd have other concerns.
Sure. Well, I think that's a credit to you though, because we're kind of glossing over this. You actually did it. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you can still buy property. Clearly, you can buy properties, whether it's in LA or Memphis. Are they as lucrative as they were in 2015? No, but that doesn't mean they're bad. And frankly, if you're house hacking, I would say to a certain degree, like you have to have a place to live. I mean, you know, any profit you're
Exactly.
getting on top of that in terms of additional rent, that's just gravy. That's a bonus.
And you still
So,
have loan buy down, right? You still
sure.
have loan buy down. You still have tax write off. So there's always like I've lost money on properties before as they cash flow because sometimes it can take as much as like 2 years before you start seeing things kind of work itself out. But it's like, okay, but over the last 2 years, I've gained this much in equity. I've gained this much in loan buy down. Like it almost like, no, they were actually profitable.
I'm enjoying talking to you because you clearly do this and you've experienced. It's not, you know, analysis by paralysis. You're not just, you know, I think people, it's funny that, you know, I'm talking to somebody who's in LA, which is one of the highest end prices, frankly, in the world and cosmopolitan city. And I'm a lowly agent in Memphis where people go not for that, but they go
There's
for.
songs about it. You're good.
There's songs about it. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing. Like you just have to do it, you know,
Mhm.
and I could tell just from talking to you, like when you have clients, you're happy to sit down with them and say like, look, here's what the numbers really are. You know, it may not, once again, it may not be as lucrative as it was in 2015, but that doesn't mean it's not bad. And
Right.
then getting back to like, maybe the client's doing a 1031, maybe they're doing something like that. Maybe they are house hacking. There's value in that. There's tons of value in that. And you can't always put that on a spreadsheet, but it's just the truth.
Right.
Like you said, you got to have a place to live. So
Yeah.
I agree with you.
That's for a lot of my clients. I'm like, look, LA is great for house hacking because you do bank on that appreciation. And like, I know like investor 101, never bank on appreciation, but it's even then, if it's a 3% increase in rent on a $3,000 a month rental, that's a far better cash flow than a 3% appreciation on a $1,000 rental. So
I think, yeah, I think, if you have your realtor hat on, you don't want to say
right,
to somebody, oh, well, it's going to go up in value. It just will.
correct.
But where you're talking about, I mean, there's literally decades of data that supports that.
Yeah,
And you gave a real life example of your condo. That's just the reality of the situation. Now, does that mean you should put an 8 or 9% return yearly? No, not necessarily. In fact, you
right.
probably shouldn't. You can still be conservative, and you can be conservative and honest with yourself about it. So both can be true.
Yeah, I agree. And, kind of circling and kind of ending it with the NAR, it's like that's probably what we're going to be seeing going forward. Is I think people are going to have harder conversations. I call this, I said 2025 is going to be the new normal. That's really what this is, right? Interest rates are not going back down to the threes. I don't think we're going to see the 30 offers, right? Unless someone decides to list their property for $1. It's
It'll
like,
be interesting to see how you kind of, if is it 2025, is it 2020? When do we kind of get out of this rut? When is it?
mhm,
I don't know. I don't know. Do we have to wait? Like you said, it wouldn't, to say that rates will eventually go to 3% is just really hard when
right. That's a hard pill to swallow.
what has to happen? What do we have to see? Is it just that you said the new norm? Is it the
Yeah.
new norm and people accept that and they say, you know what, it just is what it is. I remember when you could buy a brand new car for 16, 17,
Oh my God, it's
$18,000.
ridiculous.
You can't do that
Ridiculous, the
anymore.
ght market.
And that's it. And that's a new norm.
Yeah.
And if you want a new car, that's what it's going to cost. It just is. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know when we will once again kind of get out of this almost like a bottleneck to a degree. But
Yeah.
in some ways, it's not a bottleneck in the sense that you can buy a house today. I mean, what you just said, there's 3,500 houses for sale in January. Like there is, and we've already agreed there's plenty of capital. It just maybe it's more an acceptance by buyers that, hey, we've been waiting for these rates to go down. We really want it to go down to 3 or 4%. It's just not happening. Let's just accept it. This is a good house. The sellers are giving concessions. Going back to
Right.
so be it. And just
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah. Well, we'll see at the end of the year how accurate they were in their forecasting. I actually haven't looked to see how they've been in the past. My guess is they've probably been somewhat on par just because they have more data. They have access to more data than we do.
When they do, sometimes they'll say something and they articulate it really well. And then I'll read it and be like, oh, yeah, I am seeing that. Or, you kind of live in something and you do it every day and it's your routine, but you don't really think about it. It's kind of like second nature. And so, like an analogy would be, at least in this market, yeah, our prices have been stable. But once again, the concessions are much higher at 3, 4, 5% on that purchase price. So then you realize, well, is it really that stable? I think here our average sales price was around $250,000. And then the next year it was like 251. So you're like, okay, it was stable. It was good.
Yeah.
It was. But once again, we talk about just the concessions and things like that. So interesting. And yes, we need to do a follow-up and see what NAR says about that.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Tyler. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you?
The easiest thing is you can just go to my website, Tyler, Tyler, -like, LEIKE.com, or you can just Google me, Tyler Tapley. You'll find me. I'm on all social media platforms and things like that. So
You wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't everywhere.
I get called. Once again, we have clients throughout the world. They reach out to us all the time.
It's amazing.
And so we're happy to help. We can talk real estate and stuff like that. So we're good.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening or watching, depending where you are. And I will talk to you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in to The Key to the City of Angels. I hope you found today's episode helpful as you navigate the world of Los Angeles real estate. Whether you're looking to buy your first home, expand your investment portfolio, or sell in this competitive market, I'm here to help you succeed. Let's connect. Visit my website or follow me on social media to learn more about how I can help you achieve your real estate goals. And if you're ready to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to work with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit. Together, let's unlock your potential and make your real estate dreams a reality.